Welcome to the 2021 season where the Carolina Hurricanes are undefeated. Happy-go-lucky Dougie Hamilton is throwing fists. Thomas Greiss has become Kristers Gudlevskis from 2014. And Peter Mrazek is so bored he's hanging out with the cardboard cutouts of the Little Caesars guys. Carolina Hurricanes win 3-0 in their season opener game against the Detroit Red Wings. As an overview of the game, this was kind of a quiet, boring hockey game to watch. There was a few moments of actual legitimate excitement. The game started out looking like it was going to be kind of a runaway for the Canes, but Detroit got to hand it to them. They were actually pretty good in this game. So let's jump right into the first period. Early on, an incredible pass from Sebastian Aho, falling down on the backhand, manages to get it across the ice to Nino Niederreiter, and as you guys can see from the picture below, 4 defenders on one side, probably not a good idea for the Detroit Red Wings. And Nino makes a great move, and honestly, for a guy who had a terrible year last year by his own standards, who had a really good year in 2018-19, that's the perfect start for him, exactly what he wants, and the Canes lead 1-0. And honestly, this was pretty much the only thing to talk about with the first period. There wasn't a whole lot of chances afterwards. Both goaltenders were pretty solid, Mrazek at one and Greiss at the other. I thought a number of players that I was looking at it last season who weren't playing good were actually playing very well. Jordan Staal, I thought, had a really strong first half of the game. It did taper off a little bit toward the second half. Of course, he takes that big hit in the second period that led to the fight. But mainly, the biggest part of Staal's game that we want him to use more, and we want him to just use what he's built for in a 6'4" frame, is to use his physicality, and a lot of players on the Canes were doing that in this game, which is good. It's ideal. It's what we want. It's what we lacked in the bubble when we were playing against the Bruins. And for a team like Carolina to be successful, the physical players need to play physically. I can't state that enough. Players like Staal, McGinn, Martinook, Foegele, Dzingel, these are the guys that we want out there throwing hits all game long. Now, on the other side of that, I don't want to see Jake Gardiner throwing a hit ever. And that's not a knock against Jake or his ability to throw a hit. It's the fact that Jake's game is completely skill-based. We want Gardiner, cycling the puck, moving out with those powerful strides of his and his crossovers and really just moving the puck instead of focusing on the body. Because, of course, Jake's game is really not defensive-based. It is more offensive-based. He's more of an offensive defenseman. And I think the more you tell Jake to go out there and throw hits, probably outside of the playoffs, even in the playoffs, I wouldn't do it. I think the more you do that, the more likely he's going to be caught out of position. He's not going to throw the hit properly. He's going to get walked. Stuff like that, which we did see a few instances of Jake Gardiner in this game where he did have he tried to throw a hit and he just comes out of position. And still on Jake Gardiner, I thought the third pairing between him and Fleury through the first 2 periods was pretty shaky. But the third period is where they really shined. And I thought just closing out the first period, I'm surprised I have this much to talk about the first period in this whole game, just because of how little there was going on. But I thought Martin Necas had a really, a tough game. It wasn't a bad game or anything, but he seemed like one step behind the play. There was a few instances where he just wasn't getting the puck properly on his stick. I think most players on the team, if they had a bad first and second, they made up for it in the third, and I thought Necas was one of those players. He had a few shots on goal. But just isolating Necas' maybe first 1.5 periods of the season, he did have a bit of a rough go, but he definitely made up for it. Another player who didn't have a great game, but actually did manage to get on the score sheet was Andrei Svechnikov. I thought Svech just was kind of invisible for the first 2 periods. He did get the empty net goal, but not the best game from him. And of course, it's going to be a bit of an adjustment period for him going from the top line and playing with great possession puck players like Aho and Teravainen to moving to Jordan Staal and Necas on his wings. I'm not sure how well this is going to work. And honestly, you know what? It might not even be Necas on his wing. It might be Fost. But putting Svechnikov with Staal is going to limit some offensive production on Svechnikov's part. So I'd be curious to see how long we're going to see that line last. I would definitely prefer Svechnikov to play with Trocheck. Even if that takes a little bit of minutes away from Svechnikov, I think that ideally you just switch those second and third lines right now. But as we transition into a quiet second period, the only notable thing, Sam Gagner lays a big hit on Jordan Staal at the bench. Dougie Hamilton comes over, drops the gloves, and I don't really know who won this fight. A lot of people said Hamilton, but it was kind of even. But nevertheless, Hamilton throws fists with Sam Gagner, standing up for the captain. This, I don't know, it's weird for us to see, I think, seeing Dougie Hamilton throw hands. But this was a response that we only saw from Justin Williams in the bubble, and I think one of the biggest reasons why Carolina didn't win in the bubble. At a certain point, after a certain amount of time of being pushed around and stuff like that, and I think this is really coming from the bubble, this whole thing has been stemming from the bubble, is after a while you just have to throw hands. Like, you have to stand up for yourselves. A lot of players in the bubble, a lot of our skill guys got pushed around quite a bit, especially in the Bruins series. And as I talked about in the game reviews for that series, just like the Bruins are a team that know what they can get away with in the playoffs, and the Canes simply weren't. So the silver lining to watching Dougie fight, even though we might be worried he might break his hand or something, is we're seeing that mentality change within the Canes organization for the players, especially about what's next and how to go further in those playoffs. Other than the fight, it was a quiet second period. There wasn't much going on at all. But going into the third, it did feel like Detroit was just hanging around too long. And there was a few instances, I think Hayden Fleury had a really good block, or actually, I'm not even sure. I think it was Roenick had like this really good chance that when Mike Maniscalco and Trip Tracy looked back on the broadcast, they thought Fleury had blocked the shot, but Roenick had just like blown it 4 feet wide. One observation I had was I liked the second power play unit that had Dzingel and eventually scored with Gardner and Slavin on the points of that unit. I think they were better than the first power play unit was. They only had a few chances, of course, but the one that really cemented the game for the Canes was Gardner's point shot, tipped by Dzingel into the net. And looking at like the players that the Canes have needed to start their season off well, Nino Niederreiter, Ryan Dzingel are two players that really came in with a lot of expectations last season and didn't live up to them. And also Jake Gardner, just shooting from the point. There was a lot of times in that game where the Canes would opt to cycle the puck down low instead of throwing a puck to the net, and it was just cringy to watch. The shots ended up like 40-something to 14 in this one, and the shots easily could have been 60-14 if the Canes just threw pucks on net more. It's not a bad thing to cycle and retain possession in the offensive zone. All I'm worried about is that it becomes the focal point of offensive zone movement, whereas sometimes if a team is watching your game plan, I would just like them to change it up and just throw a puck on net. So Dzingel gets the power play goal pretty late into the third period to seal it. And of course, Svechnikov, as I mentioned earlier, shoots the puck from like the neutral zone, just kind of dribbles into the net for a 3-0 score. So the Canes take game 1 of the season 3-0. And overall, looking at the game, I think it's a great foundation to build off of for the Canes. Obviously, this is a game that could have really went either way when you look at it. Detroit did hang around just a little bit too long in this one, but the Canes, of course, closed it out. I thought 2 of the 3 defensive pairings were strong throughout the whole game. I really liked Brady Shea's game in this one. He did have a few moments where he looked kind of like he was running out of control. But Brady Shea next to Brett Pesce is just a perfect tandem for them. Pesce's going to make very little mistakes, and Shea now has an option to freewheel a little bit more than he did in the bubble while Pesce was out. The third pairing, as I mentioned before, Gardner and Hayden Fleury, a little bit rough in the first period and a half, but they really turned around in the third. I thought Hayden Fleury played really well. Gardner, of course, has the assist on the Dzingel goal, which is huge. And that about does it for this game. The next one on Saturday, January 16th, against Detroit as well. So hopefully, again, I think we're going to see a lot of these games where, the first matchup of the season, because we're playing in these 2 or 3 game sets constantly all year, we're going to see a lot of trading off games. I hope that's not the case. I would assume the Red Wings come back with Jonathan Bernier in net, and on the other end, I assume the Canes will probably play James Reimer. So the 2013, is it 2013? I guess 2014 Toronto Maple Leafs goalie tandem, it will face off against each other. So obviously no word yet on that, but that's what I'm guessing, is that most teams are probably going to try to get their goalies in and playing a lot of games early on, just because, again, rest time and getting acclimated with no exhibition games preseason and a very small training camp. Overall, this was a solid game for the Canes, but they do have to build on it. They have to get better every day, but we can't complain with starting off the season with a win. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching the video. The second game of the season on Saturday against Detroit should be another good game. Hopefully the Canes come out and win it. Again, it's Detroit. They should win it. That's the overall expectation of that game. A realistic one is to beat the team that was 31st in the league last year. But hopefully on Saturday we see a lot more offense from them. Again, guys, thank you so much for watching. Please consider liking the video down below. Subscribe to the channel if you want more Canes content. And I will see you guys for the Canes game review of game number 2.